Hi, nice to see you all. Welcome to the Paulding & Company kitchen. I thought today we'd look at knives. And I wanted to start with chef's knives. A chef knife is any knife that has a bolster where you can hold the knife and not end up with your fingers on the board. There are a lot of different types of chef knives. So I wanted to start with 4 different kinds of knives that are all the same size. These are 8-inch chef knives. And I want to tell you what the differences between them are. The first one here is an inexpensive knife. And it is stamped steel. And what the knife does is it has a tang that comes into the handle but doesn't go all the way through it. And it's a carbon stainless, but it's not particularly high-grade carbon stainless. And that means that the knife will take an edge very well, but it won't hold it for a long time, so you're sharpening a lot. This one, on the other hand, is the more expensive version of that knife. And it is a better quality of carbon steel. It's a stainless steel still, but there's a higher level of carbon in it, and it's just a much better quality metal so that when it takes an edge, it will hold it better. This one is all one piece. It's a very modern knife, and it also has a feature called grantons. And grantons are these little divots in the knife that you can see whenever you pick it up, and they're up a little bit because as you sharpen this knife over the years, you take a little bit of edge off, and they are meant to stay throughout that. And what they do is if you're cutting something, say you're cutting a potato, and you slice down the potato, what happens is that the grantons will release the slices from the knife, which is very important when you've got something as sticky as a potato that will stick to the knife. The last 8-inch chef's knife is not really a chef's knife, it's called a santoku. And it is a hybrid between a Japanese cleaver and a regular American chef's knife. So it has a little bit of a different shape. And you can see that if you compare 2 knives, that it's a much deeper blade. And this one is a very good knife. It has extremely carefully handmade blade, and it will hold an edge for a very long time with minimal work to keep it sharp. I wanted to talk a little bit about, with the chef knife, how you hold it. Because the purpose, and let me move these away, the purpose of the bolster here, and they all have a bolster of one sort or another, is to keep your hands from hitting the board when you're cutting. You don't want to end up wrapping your knuckles every stroke. All chef's knives have a little bit of an angle so that you can rock the knife to cut. And usually when you're chopping something, you're holding the end of the knife in place, using it as a fulcrum, and chopping with your other hand. So these knives are used for slicing, chopping, prep tasks. The next group of knives are carving knives. And they come in many different styles. This is just 2 different carvers. One, they're usually flexible, they're usually long, so that you can run them through, let's say, your slice of, your roast to slice it. And some of them, again, have grantons so that the meat will fall off the knife more easily. If you're carving a chicken, you often want a slightly smaller knife. If you're carving a great big roast, you want a bigger one. but they're all basically the same purpose, these knives. All four of these are serrated knives, and they each have a unique purpose. This little one is simply a paring knife, and it's extremely useful to have a paring knife that's serrated for certain tasks. It cuts through tomatoes really easily. It cuts through tender fruit really easily. And it cuts through fibrous foods better, like artichokes, for instance. This is a bigger version. It's called a utility knife. It doesn't have the bolster here, so you can't use it to chop with because you hit your hand. But a lot of people find a utility knife is very handy for cutting various things. And again, you would want to cut tomatoes with this knife. It's the perfect knife for that. The last group of knives I want to show you are a couple of different types of regular bladed knives. This is just your simple paring knife, and it's meant for peeling an apple, doing small tasks, paring off the skin of anything. This one is another utility knife. This one has the Grantons. It's a very useful knife for a variety of small tasks. A lot of people like knives this size and shape, and so it's a good thing to have one of. But this one is special, and this is a boning knife. There are two different styles of boning knife that you can get. There's this style, and then there's one that the blade doesn't curve, it goes straight. This knife is meant for working in and out and around the bones when you're taking them out of a chicken, a piece of meat, and that's really its only purpose in life. Finally, I want to show you how to keep your knife sharp. I'm not going to teach you how to sharpen a knife. Hopefully you've got sharp knives in your kitchen. And if you want to keep them that way, this is the tool you need. It's called a steel. And some of them are round, some of them are oval in shape. Some of them are diamond, some of them are ceramic. They all work very well, and what they do is when you run your knife along the steel at the angle of the blade, it realigns the molecules on the edge and allows you to keep the knife sharp for 2, 3, 10 times as long. And you only need to do that maybe half a dozen times. And if you do it frequently, as in like every day or almost every time you use the knife for an extended period, your knives will stay sharp for a whole lot longer. Obviously, the steel is only good for your straight edge knives. You can imagine running the serrated edge knife down the steel would be very counterproductive because it would basically take the sharpness off of it. And the other thing I want to say about the steel is that every knife has an angle to the blade. And you have to get to know the different angles of your knife. If you use the steel and you do too sharp an angle, you're simply taking the edge off. If you do too flat an angle, you're taking the side of the knife off. So what you have to do is you have to find that blade's angle and sharpen just at that angle. And after a while, it becomes very intuitive. You can feel it with the knife. Finally, always use the guard on this. Some chefs like to sharpen. They prefer to actually go down like this because it's very safe. Some chefs like to sharpen this way. This is the way I learned, so it's what I prefer. And then the final piece of information on using the steel is always do both sides equally so that you don't end up with an imbalance.